Welcome to A Scrap Life, a podcast solely focused on the hustlers, grinders, operators, and business owners who live and breathe the scrap metal industry every day. We are the original recyclers. No suits required, just guts and hard work. Here is your host, Brett Eckhart.
All right, guys, I'm back. Another episode of A Scrap Life. This one I'm kind of excited about. It's a unique story. It took me a little convincing, a little bit of time working on Dennis. I'm sitting here via Zoom with Dennis Laviage from C&D Scrap Metal out in Houston. Man, I got introduced to you via, I think it's your cousin, Proler, right, Chris?
Right.
I did a podcast with him probably a year-ish ago, and I didn't know at the time that you guys were cousins. So it's awesome. And then from then on, I've just kind of followed your story, and recently, and we'll get into it in this podcast. We'll get into the sale of C&D and kind of what that looks like for the small, medium-sized operators. But more importantly, man, I'm just happy to have you on here, and the Mr. $2 bill himself. Thanks for coming on, Dennis.
Thanks, Brett. I appreciate that.
So real quick, man, I just want to touch base. I mean, you come from a long line of scrap lineage, really, right? To a certain extent. And when I say that, I mean just family in the business, and, whether it's cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever, wives, and you have such a unique story, such a kind of an interesting dynamic that when I've been kind of pushing you, I'm like, dude, you got to get on this, you got to get on here. Like, let's tell the story. So from what I understand, you sent me a picture, 1974, man, is when...
No, 1979. Don't age me.
Well, in the picture, it says 1974, right?
No, that was an old... No, 79.
79 was when C&D was actually founded.
No, C&D opened up in 1979.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that picture of you sitting in, it looks like, is it a Chevy pickup, like an S10 style? Right?
Yes, sir.
And what year is that? What year is that?
That was 1974, and I had a business called Dennis Scrap Metal.
Okay.
But I'm not going to age myself. I'm going to tell you how long I've been in this business. Okay. So
okay.
I used to go. My dad was in the scrap metal business. Back in those days, of course, it was called the junk business.
Yeah.
And at 7, 8 years old, I'd go to work with him. And my first shear, okay, in fact, the only shear that my father had was a steel wheel with a 4-inch bar coming up about 4 feet, 5 feet, welded on with a bolt cutter. And that's how I cleaned number 1, number 2 copper, cocks and faucets was with this shear.
I had one of those. We had one of those.
I go back a while, but
yeah.
And then of course I drove them crazy for the next 10 years. But I had opened up a company in 1974. I was 18 years old, Dennis Scrap Metal. My first customer was the Thailand Motor Hotel. Now, mind you, this is a hotel that is open for business. I come in, I talk to this guy, and he wants me to take their old broiler system out. Now, I'm on a pickup truck. I know nothing about doing any of this. And here I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to tackle this job of this chiller bundle while the hotel is in complete operation.
Yeah.
So that was my first customer, and it went on. But I was working from 8 to 12, and I would go out and buy 100 car batteries for $100 from every service station, place, tire, wherever they did batteries.
Dollar battery.
Right, and took it with the battery. Oh, wait, I'd stop at the service station on the way to the lead company, and I'd fill the batteries up with more water, okay? Knowing the wind's going to blow the excess water as I drive, and I sold them for $2 a pound. So at 18 years old, I'm making $100 a day in 4 hours, and I was out by the pool the rest of the time. I found a girl in California and decided, I'm going to move there. So I pack up my shit in my scrap truck, my pickup, and I drive to California to see a girl. I never saw her again. And next thing I know, so I went to work for Alpert and Alpert on Soto Street back in the day. This was 1974 when the Alperts were all running the company. I ended up getting terminated because they were separating aluminum shaving, grades of aluminum. I'm thinking, what the hell? What do I know about separate? I couldn't get it, did not understand it back then.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting there in a pickup truck with a trailer of furniture. I ended up giving the pickup truck back to the leasing company early, packed up my shit, and I was on an airplane with 4 boxes. So that was my tenure there. And I went and did a couple of other stupid little jobs. Went to work at markets or Gulf Metal Industries in their zinc and aluminum smelting back in 75 or 76. And stayed there for a while. And then I went to work at a company called Houston Junk. That's now Rose Metal. They're actually still in business today. We had a shredder. There were 2 shredders in town.
Okay.
Houston Junk, and they were on 3.5 acres of property. And the other shredder was at Proler International, the big boys.
Yep.
And so I worked there for 2.5 years, almost 3, and I got married. And I did the worst thing that a son-in-law would ever do to a daughter is I told my wife, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to open up my own scrapyard.
So that's C&D, right?
And that became C&D.
So what does the C&D stand for?
It was for Cindy and Dennis.
Okay.
And now Cindy and Dennis are divorced.
Okay.
We were married for 38 years and separated quite a while. But believe it or not, we're still in business together until this past November. We still have a lot of personal business property. But so I worked with my ex-wife for the last, I've been divorced, I guess, going on, I don't even know, 8 or 9 years, and been separated totally for maybe 10 or 11. And we still work together till this day. She she came to work in 96, and she did all the accounting in the HR, and then we started growing and had to have more and more and more people. But she still manages the HR there before we sold this past November, and now she's just clearing up, and we're trying to get out of there completely.
So as much as you want to say your story is different, because you do have a unique story, there is a lot of your story that, like, when you trace the roots of, most scrap metal recycling companies, right? Scrap businesses, and mine included. And we had an interesting story when we had a partnership with Snitcher Steel and whatnot. It still traces back to family business. And yours is no different in that regard. Now,
I knew nothing.
Yeah, how you built your business, I believe, is the uniqueness, and that's the unique story of you, Dennis, and C&D, and how you were able to gain exposure and whatnot. But the part of it that's interesting to me, and that does create some similarities, is I watched my parents build a business, right? And you and your wife, your ex-wife at the time, built a business together. You had kids in the business. You had a father in the business. Now, explain to me that now that this is where I think some of the differences come in is, you did end up divorcing your first wife, and you guys were able to figure out a bit amicable
at the end of it, right?
Yeah, you're able to, work through that and still stay in business, which I don't think most people would. I think one stays, one goes, or the business goes.
Right.
So that's a I think that's commendable, if you want my honest opinion. But explain to me everybody else that came in, into the business on the family side.
Well, I'm very fortunate, okay, because I was raised in the days of the hippies and marijuana and all that stuff. And so I, dropped out of high school in the 11th grade. I had no idea what these people were talking about. And it started in first grade when I got held back.
Yeah.
Today we call that ADD. Mine's ADD, HHAD. I have a mass number of letters there. But I just, I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. So I was smoking a joint going to high school every day. I'd get to English class first period, I was sound asleep. And that was it. Never got in trouble. I mean, I just had no idea. So I go and quit high school. And that's when I decided to figure out what I'm going to do. And I was in and out of the scrap business. That's all I knew from the age of 5 or 6 years old. So, here I am just like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
I have no education. And so you want to know what I did through my career? It took one very serious trend, here, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's what I did for 44 years.
Yeah.
And I slept with it. I lived it. I thought about it. I have stories, the bottom line is I have no education, and I speak at University of Houston's graduating entrepreneurial classes. Here I am, a high school dropout, and I don't tell them my whole story, but I tell kids that when they're in college, I don't tell them they don't need it, because to me, you don't need college. You're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, whatever. Some people need it. I didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
And I tell them, in life, when you get into the building, you got 3 choices. You can go to the basement, you can kind of coast in the middle, or you can go straight to the penthouse. And those are those 3 choices. No matter how much education, it's who you know and how hard you want to work and what your goal is at the end of the day.
So the key is, man, like the key is, and we will revisit the family piece, but the biggest thing is, and I think what you're trying to get across, and if I'm wrong, please let me know, is you don't stay in business or build the type of business you build by working Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And I think that that's where, like, my generation, or even the generation or 2 below me, they think that because their parents built a business, or because their grandfather, or because, they see people around them that are successful, they feel like, well, that should just naturally, I should just have success. It should just be part of the deal. Or I shouldn't have to work, 80, 90 hours a week to attain success. That's, and I have always pushed back on that and said, in order to be successful, like, you need a few things, patience being one of them. And you've got to fucking be patient. And and the second one is you've got to put the hours in. So it's the patience to keep going. It's the hours you have to work. And it's the money you have to put back into your business and continually put back into it that is what's going to actually build you a real business.
Right. That was it.
It's not an education thing. We're not running hospitals here, right? Like,
no.
We're in a pretty
almost.
Yeah, we're in a pretty gritty, industry where there's still a lot of general labor that is involved in it. Now, it has become a little more mechanized over the years, for sure. And when you talk about your first year was basically a hand wheel with a rod that comes up, and that's how you're.
Don't go with the hand, Fred. Not that far back. Almost.
But you know what I mean? Like, basically, like a manual hand shear, right? And I think ultimately, like, the industry has come a long way, but there is still a significant amount of general labor and just hustle and bustle and hard work that goes into our industry. So
I changed my clothes 3 times a day from 1979 probably through 1987. 3 times. I live in Houston, not Idaho. Okay.
Yeah.
It's 110 out here with a 900% humidity. I did what I had to do, and I got very lucky. And I got, it was hard work and it was luck. And at the time when I was married, I had my wife standing behind all the stuff that was going on. She was working for Shell Oil, and making more money than I was making working at Houston Junk. I think I was making $150 a week. And here I am getting married. My rent was $130 where I was living. So it wasn't that bad. I got started in this business, and I was on a truck, and I was weighing and paying. So I had a scale on the back of my truck, and I would hit industry, and I would pick up their metal. I would weigh them right there, and I would pay them. And we do that till this very day. We weigh and pay.
Yeah.
We don't do it as much because we just, I don't want the exposure of the cash and the buyer, but we weigh and pay still every day, and in some way, shape, or fashion.
Yeah.
And that's what I did to run my business, and I worked out of my townhouse when I got married. I went to a mini storage. I had like an 8x8, and I was stripping copper wire with a razor, and I was, and then
you were doing what every entrepreneur, like hustler, does. You were just trying to figure out how to build a real fucking business. Like how to
I didn't know what I was.
How do I stay afloat? How do I feed myself, feed my wife, feed my family, keep a roof over my head? Like all the stuff that people look at now and they're like, oh, you have a good life, Dennis. Everything is nice. It's, shiny. It's the glitz. And you're like, no. There's a lot of fucking years where I'm trying to just eat dinner,
Oh God, Brett, I just kept getting bigger. And I don't even know till this day. I don't even know how.
I was going to ask you. So when from when you did that, what do you think was like? And we'll get into some of the influencer stuff here in a little bit. But
if they worked 1 year, 1 day. They worked 5 years. They got 5 days. That was it. I mean, it was 1 day a year. Period. It wasn't anything that.
Yeah.
And so I hired this guy, and it made me understand that I needed him. Okay. And the only way I was going to keep this one guy that knew metals and knew shears and knew how to do this little operation that I had was to take care of my guy. And he was with me for about 15 years. But, I started out with a 1,250. Then I went to a 26. I added another one and another one. I had these 3 warehouses next to each other. And I knew that I was weighing and paying, but I had to figure out a way to get business. So I don't know if y'all had the Green Sheet ever. It was a newspaper. They had one publication that went out every week to everyone in Houston. All right.
Okay.
And then I went in there and I started advertising, C&D scrap metal. I didn't know what I was advertising. I'm just advertising. And then they went and they split the paper up and decided to do Southeast Houston, Southwest Houston, East Houston. So now there's instead of 1, there's 15. So I kept advertising literally every single day. I was in this, and that's how I got my company going.
So the differentiator for you, what you're telling me is you were willing to spend money on advertising from the very beginning.
Not knowing, not even understanding.
Just trying to get your name out there.
No, I just needed business. I never thought that I was going to continue that for the next 40 years. But
what I'm saying is like that, but by you doing that, you feel like that was your competitive advantage, is that you got onto that and you said, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to advertise. I'm going to market, C&D. I'm going to at least put some ads in the Green Sheet and see if it drums me up any business.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And then I started buying a cap here and there. I started buying T-shirt, giving them to my customers. And I never stopped advertising, ever. From that day on, my advertising budget back in 2008, all the way to 2005, 2005, probably to 2009, I spent over $1 million to $1.3 million annually on advertising. I was running television commercials. I started out late night commercials, $22 for 30-second spots.
Okay.
And I started running the shit out of late night. And here I am 30 years later, and the nighttime, late night spots were free because of the prime time that I was buying.
Yeah.
So, I was running on probably at one time over 20 television stations, cable, you name it. I went out, I became a corporate partner of the Houston Astros for 9 seasons, the Rockets. I'm sitting front row. I've got C&D scrap metal all over the stadium. I'd pass out 17 games. I would pass out 500 to 1,000 caps, Rocket, C&D logo, both, I went to China. I bought 10,000 sets of house shoes embroidered with the Rockets. and the Astros, the Rockets and C&D. And I probably threw out 20, 30,000 pieces in that period of time. Wow. And I got out there and I went to the Houston Comets, and I was at Sam Houston Race Park, and I was at Houston Raceway Park. I mean, the Houston Chronicle, I'm running full ads. I'm on the radio. I've got 20 billboards out in the city. You know, not a lot of friendly competitors when they really should be thanking me and kissing my ass, because here I am introducing the recycling business to the fourth largest city in the United States.
Yeah.
I was running my kids in those commercials. My kids started doing my commercials. My daughter, I think, was 4. And my son was 6. The first day of taping took us 8 hours and they were the only 2 doing the commercial. And it took us 8 hours of takes to get this commercial on the air. And so my kids were running commercials probably for 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And I finally decided I don't think I need to be exploiting them, because that's really what I was doing. And then I started doing the commercials myself. And then I've had Dikembe Mutombo from the Houston Rockets did commercials. I've had Snoop Dogg do, pretend commercials with me. I've had Barbara and George Bush sitting next to them on the front row of the Houston Astros. I've placed myself all over the city to being the most well-known scrap metal recycler in the fourth largest city in the United States of America, is what I did. Somehow I came up with this stupid idea of $2 bills. And
so I was going to ask you, so now I want to know, I like to think of, like, people talk about influencer marketing and, okay, I'm going to get on TikTok or YouTube or, whatever it is. And I'm going to basically get people, I'm going to pay people to promote my product. I'm going to advertise here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But when I listen to your story, I mean, you took it to another level.
Extreme.
You went influencer on steroids before influencer was ever even.
And, I built in my Astros contract, every contract with a sports team, I built in my contract front row seats. And I used to say to myself, God damn it, if I ever go broke, I'm going to be really pissed off about the amount of money that I threw away. But the branding that I brought till this day, and I haven't been with the Rockets since Fertitta bought our team, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago. I was with the Astros to the season after we won the World Series, right? I had a left center and right field billboards that were visible during the World Series. I think the first or second game, somebody hit a ball up there. I must have gotten, God knows, 5,000 hits on this, because it was on every single news station.
Like 5,000 hits, like 5,000 phone calls, 5,000 email, like 5,000 want to do business, or
ran it that many times. It was constantly being run all over the world. It was like I would having people from Oklahoma or people from California. I'm thinking, gee, and it kept running. I don't know if it hit a CNN or whatever the hell it was, but
Going back, would you do it all again the same way? Would you change it anyway?
Yes. If I want to be successful, you damn right I will.
Yeah.
But people, all the years I tried to sell my company, I think one of the reasons I couldn't was the amount of exposure that we have.
Yeah.
A lot of scrap yards don't want that exposure, and we get picked on religiously. Okay. But, I wanted to tell you about in 1987, I think it was, I get a knock on my door. It's the Internal Revenue Service. They want to do an audit, right? And I'm thinking everything's great. I don't have any fucking problems. I give all my accountant every quarter. He gets all my shit. No big deal.
Yeah.
Well, this audit went on for like a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years. All right. And I'm sitting at work one day, and I'm in my office, and there's a knock at the front of our scale house, and it's 3 guys. And so they tell me they want to speak to me, and there's so-and-so with the criminal investigation of the Internal Revenue Service. Please step into my office. They come in, I have no fucking idea. And they said, Mr. Laviage, you have the right to remain silent. You have the, you know, they're reading me my Miranda rights. And I'm thinking, what the hell?
What's going on?
So they said, we just want to ask you some questions. And I said, that's fine. And so they asked me, you know, one or two questions or something. I said, you know what, hold on 1 second. And I turned around and I called my lawyer, who was an ex-IRS agent who had been dealing with this shit with me. And he goes, just tell them to leave your office, and any more questions, they can call me. And I looked at him and I said, it was nice meeting all three of you gentlemen. I have nothing else to say. Here's my lawyer. That criminal investigation went on for 2 years. They ended up seizing my wife's Mercedes, okay? I was looking at Geraldo Rivera, people going through IRS audits. Everywhere I went, I would see this fucking investigator in my head. I was on the dance floor one night with my wife. It's like, you know, paranoid people are taking pictures. This went on for about 3.5 years. I'm on Prozac and Ativan, right? Yeah. So I'm so high about 12 o'clock, I needed a stepladder to scratch my ass from medication going through this shit. Lo and behold, 2% of Americans sue the Internal Revenue Service, and 1% beat them. Yeah. And I went after them. I got my wife's car back. I threatened a lawsuit on them if they ever put my name in the paper on how it was seized. That wasn't done. I go to trial, and I beat their asses there. And I never heard another word from them. And
do you think that was brought on because you were so out there? And
no, I wasn't out there. I wasn't out there. I think what happened is an employee of mine had stolen a government check. And when he went to the bank, he cashed his payroll check in the government. I think that triggered it. At the end of the day, it became, they thought we were double dipping. So I had a buyer, and every day the buyer kept, at the time it was $2,000. He'd go out, he'd buy metal, and at the end of the day, if he spent $1,800, I'd write him a check. Or the buyer's account would start off with $2,000. And they didn't understand why I was doing that. They thought I was double dipping when we're doing the same books. It's just I'm reimbursing the buyer's book, and and it was a clusterfuck. But at the end of the day, I'm in every lawsuit in the government. Laviage versus the United States of America. I got my attorney fees back, and I could have gone for all of them if I had gone to the Fifth Circuit. But I went, you know what? I'm done with this. Shit.
I'm ready to be done with this one.
So that put me, and then in 2015, when they started getting the scrap metal police in Houston, these are just the shit that I dealt with within a period of about 15 years. Okay, of the 44 years I'm in business, and so this cop, they're just all over. And by now, I'm very well known in Houston. Right, there's nowhere I can't go where somebody doesn't recognize me. So these scrap police are on us like stink on shit. And I'm just sitting there thinking, you know, so they bring this new sergeant in and to introduce him. And we're sitting at my desk and I looked at the side. I said, listen, let me tell you exactly, this is how I work. I said, Sergeant, this is my office. This is my home. And you're my guest. And if you are going to want me to give you respect, then you need to give it to me in return. And if we can't do that, then we don't need to have this introduction anymore. Well, that did not set him free. Okay. He was a little bit upset after that because I knew the guy was an asshole before I even had a conversation. So between 2015, when I started my last expansion, we're getting tickets. I must have gotten 75 tickets from HPD metal theft. They not one ticket was ever had to be paid or fined because they either didn't show up, they didn't have any evidence, or they just fucked up. And they went through this. So finally, this sergeant comes to my office December 22nd of 15. He's looking for, at my other location, 1 pound of brass. We're supposed to hold on to metal 70. He's looking for 1 fucking pound of brass. And 162 pounds of insulated copper. I'm buying, I don't know, 80,000 to 100,000 pounds of wire insulated every week. I'm thinking this guy is looking for, and so he gets to my other location and he gives my son 5 tickets one for the wire, not holding it, one for the brass, 1 pound, not holding it, and not reporting it. Okay, gives my daughter 3 tickets. I'm done. I've had it. My daughter's a cashier. She's got nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
So January 4th of 2016, the third, they come in and they're fucking with me about a catalytic converter, and they want to put it on a hold. No problem. Here, hold it. No big deal. So they hold it and end up releasing it. No big deal. Well, so I'm sitting at my office. I go to my location. I'll never forget this day. I'm 60 years, 11 months, and 4 days old. I leave my main location. I go to my other location where my son is, and 6:20 p.m. on a Friday night. And I said, I'm talking to him. And all of a sudden, a cop car pulls up. And I said, I'll take care of it. Brandon, my son says, I'll handle it. So he walks over. He says, yes, sir. He says, I need to speak to Mr. Laviage. He says, why, Mr. Laviage? He looks at him. He goes, no, I need to speak to that Mr. Laviage. Well, since 93 or 96, I have always carried a pistol on my side. Okay. I don't leave my house without it. I don't travel without it. I don't leave my house. So I walk up to the officer, and the first thing he does is he takes my gun and he says, I have a warrant for your arrest. You're under arrest. And I'm thinking it's a joke because I've got like friends, assistant chiefs, head of the constable in Houston. I know all the state senator. I'm thinking somebody's fucking with me. Well, no, they weren't fucking with me. Next thing I know, another car pulls up. So now I've got 2 cop cars, 4 cops. 30 minutes later, and this is all happening in front of my employees, okay? Another cop car pulls up. 6 cops, 3 police cars. And here I am going to fucking jail. And I'm in shock. I am in absolute shock. I looked at him. I said, let me ask you a question. Did Sergeant Asshole by any chance put this warrant out? And he goes, yeah, that was him. I went, that's what I thought. I said, I guess that internal affairs complaint pissed him off. So he basically retaliated. Let me go on. About 2.5 years of trying to get me to plea bargain. And I could tell you, I don't want to do it on the air.
Yeah.
But funny enough, I'm going through this. I'm in jail for 6 hours. I get arrested at 6:20 p.m. I'm in my bed at 3:30 Saturday morning. So from 6:20 p.m. till 3:30, I've got my life fucked up here.
Yeah.
I should have been arrested 1,000 times in 60 years, 11 months, and 4. And here I'm getting arrested from some chicken shit cop that's retaliating. So very first time I ever said, thank God I'm well known in the 4th largest city in the U.S. because I was segregated in my own cell, my own toilet, my own sink. It was about 58 fucking degrees in there. I have a shirt on. I covered up my C&D shirt because I did not want to be in jail with that shirt on. Goddamn it, every customer I had was probably in there. And I'm sitting there freezing my ass off, and I bet you I urinated about 30 or 40 times. And I said I said, is there any way I could make a phone call? All I could see was half of a clock and half of a Rockets game. And he lets, and that's a crazy ass story, but I finally get out of this cell and I go home.
What are you doing in jail for? What's the deal?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to tell you. So when they strip me and they do all the shit they're doing and they book me, the guy looks at me and I have this around my neck, okay? This and a thread around I didn't realize that everything but your tattoos come off of you. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, like, you need to get I went, man, like that. Well, the sergeant to the right of me goes, sir, is that for your religion? Because now I already know something's because I've got a VIP on me, right?
Yeah.
He goes, let them have it. Don't worry about it. Leave it on. I said, yes, sir. It's for my religion. It's not. I just don't want to take it off, right? So they escort me to this elevator, and the elevator's got a jail cell in it. And I'm sitting there. He doesn't close it, but I'm in. And the guy that's running, he looks at me and goes, what the fuck are you doing in here? I went, some piece of shit cop, so-and-so retaliated. He arrested me. So go 2.5 years of fighting. I ripped his ass wide open in court. My name was cleared within 4 weeks. And I never had another problem with this asshole. So I finally ended up suing him. I was going to sue him for $100,000. That was 45 going back to me to sue him in my criminal trial. And the other 55 I was donating back to HPD.
Yeah.
So they could train their officers to not retaliate against citizens that file an internal affairs complaint. The reason I was arrested was failure to report to the state of Texas. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, we report every day at close of business.
Yeah.
State of Texas gets, 60% and 100% has to go to the city leads online, right? Well, we had just gotten the new system with one of the, I don't want to name the company, I will, Scrap Dragon. And we're the first ones to get their Scrap Dragon X, so where they could put it at both locations. And if you went to either location, we had your data. Well, it's evident it went backwards. And so what happened when they set it up, it didn't allow some of the metals being there sent to DPS. So he arrested me for failure to report to the DPS, knowingly and intentionally. But listen,
okay,
so
I'm listening.
It was so fucking stupid. The only reason he arrested me was because I sent to leads online. I'm thinking, dumbass, if I'm trying to get away something, would I be sending the shit to one police agency and not the other?
Yeah.
It was just a chicken shit deal, and I beat him. And
was that like at the end of the day? That's terrible, man. Like, and I think,
and I'm all about police. Okay,
our industry,
I'm all about.
Yeah, our industry, we have been kind of looked down upon for a lot of years. People with the junk business, scrap business, and right now, I mean, people are trying to, change the name of the industry to the recycled whatever, right? And I get it. I understand it's an image thing. It's, the guy that wants to be known as a recycling and not scrap or whatever.
Oh, I was the first one in Houston, Texas to have the word scrap metal recycler.
Yeah. And there's a long lineage of, of junk and scrap and whatever else. And whether it should be changed or not, that's not I'm not speaking for the industry. I just want to, I want people to know it's stories like that and, the IRS stories and everything else that goes along with the battles that we fight to just be legitimate. And we're doing the right things. I mean, are there some rogue players out there? Absolutely, there is. Just like
there's bad police. There's bad everything.
There's bad police. There's bad financial advisors. There's bad doctors. Absolutely. But for the most part, and I talk to a fair amount of people in our industry, there's a lot of good operators, man. There's real savvy businessmen, real savvy businesswomen that are about it and they understand. And I don't know. Some of them have a 10th grade education. Some of them have 2 college degrees. Like it spans the spectrum of what you're going to run into. But is that the defining moment? That last one that you just spoke of, that story, was that one of the things that that made you think about selling your company?
No, that was all about the family dynamics. But I will tell you, an ordinance that Houston had in 1982, you couldn't stack metal, ferrous. Mm-hmm. It had to be stacked six inches above the ground and no higher than 6 feet.
Wow.
There's 20,000 tons sitting in Pearl International's yard. I'm thinking, what kind of dumbass would make? And then our mayor just recently passed a law in the city that you can't sell catalytic converters.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, Bel Air is 1 mile to my right. West University is 2 miles to the left. This guy's, so that's the most aggravating portion are the ordinances that we deal with and the bullshit of people that don't understand what our purpose is. And we do not get we get nothing but bad raps. I do 100%. Almost 9 out of 10 expert television news reports. They call me when it comes to theft. And the next thing I know, I'm being accused of being the one that's doing the buying. You know, yesterday, I swear to God, one of our AM, I get a call from a friend yesterday morning, 8:37. He goes, Dennis, you need to turn on this talk show. They're talking about you. Well, they got this auto sergeant on the phone and he's doing this podcast with this, and this guy's got 200,000, 300,000 daily listeners. And he goes, and someone says, well, where are they selling it? And he goes, well, you know, it's like that company that pays in $2 bills. I'm not going to mention any names. And I called this police officer and chewed his ass out yesterday. I said, you don't have, and anyway, Brett, I could go on with stories.
I know you can, man. And that's the point, man. That's why I wanted you on this show. That's why I want to have the conversation with you. Is you got so much experience. You have, I mean, like I said, I feel like you're kind of like one of the fathers of influencer marketing. You took celebrities, you took it, the marketing side of the business. And I've always, the people have said this to me before, and was why I enjoy talking to you, is they're like, one thing about you, Brett, is you don't pull any punches. You just leave it out there and you say, here's what I am, here's what I do. And I feel like that's the genuineness that's being conveyed, and of who we are and what we're doing, but also the marketing aspect of when you say you didn't take your foot. I'm going to kind of go back a little bit. You said you never took the foot off the gas from 08 until just here a year or two ago. You kept the foot on the gas of the marketing, and everybody knows in end of 08, 09, the market was fucking terrible. I mean. But
I was printing money. We were printing money.
Yeah, and what I've told people is when the markets are the worst is when you should be spending the most on marketing. And people they're like, oh, we can't afford it. I'm like, you can't fucking afford not to, because
you know, I like what you said, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I gauge my business on my marketing. There were times when we had 225 customers. And when it got too busy, I had to call my agent up and say, we need to stop for a week, because I didn't want them being pissed off. And then when business slowed down, kick it back up. Yeah. That's what it did for us. Okay. I mean, if I hadn't marketed, I would have never grown to where I am today.
Well, I mean, at one time I read a figure, and I guarantee you'll probably know this number or be close. There was like 500 and something scrap recycling companies in Texas or something. It was crazy. It was like 550 different yards.
Well, I opened up at 34 scrap yards in Houston in 08. There were 190. It went down to probably 110 or 112, I think it was. And I think I heard yesterday 131 of them are in Houston.
In Houston alone, right? Like, yeah. So how do you differentiate yourself if you're 130 something yards? Like, you better figure it out, right? And I think the hack that you're telling, that you did, and it takes a unique personality to do what you did. It takes more than just $1 million. It takes some thought process. It takes some ingenuity. It takes some looking at seeing what other people are doing and saying, yeah, I could do that with my own little twist, right? But this podcast could be just as much about, the importance of marketing as it is about scrap. You and I's podcast today is, how do you build a business? Well, you got to figure out what your niche is. You got to figure out, like, how are you going to differentiate yourself from 130 scrap yards in the same city?
No, I took care of that, and I'll tell you something else. And every scrap dealer in this city can call me a liar. They can do whatever they want, but I will tell you this: when C&D scrap metal is slow, everybody's slow. When I'm booming, they're busy and booming. I can promise you this, and I know that because of the recognition that we have. You have to remember, I had
because you're going to get your portion of the market share.
It was unbelievable, and they weren't shopping, and I had customers that have been coming in, for ages. Even when I closed my other location down in 2016, I got 95% of my industry over to my other location. I lost the ma and pa's basically because we have no zoning in Houston, so you can have a scrapyard next to anybody. The only zoning, the only ordinance is it's like you got to be 300 foot from a school, church, or residence. I don't care what you have next door. You can open anything you want to open. And so I'm in a residential area. I bought 6 lots with a warehouse. And by 1988, I had 24 pieces of property, and it was an acre and a half, 3/4 of an acre on the right side, and 3/4 of an acre across the street on the left side. And I was booming, you know. And now I want to talk to you about something, because I talked to you about this before we got on, and I listened to a lot of your podcast, and you're right about the family orients. You know, I'll tell you a funny story. The only people in the scrap business in Houston were Jews. Okay. There weren't any other people but Jews in the scrap business. And so I grew up in a business that I didn't know what I knew from the day that I was going to work, that I was going to be a scrap metal guy. I used to pick up, you're not going to ever remember this. I don't even know if you know it now. But back when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, our toothpaste tubes came in lead tubes.
Okay, I did know that, but I didn't know that that was a thing. But I did know about.
Well,
lead,
no, it was all.
lead.
So I had every neighbor. I'd sell my lead tubes to my father. I had somebody 10 years ago, 8 years ago, came in, and I found 6 of these in their lead scrap. And I have them hung up because today, you know what we call that? Lead poison.
Yeah.
Okay. But, you know, my family situation in my business was I got into business because of my father. Of course, I never worked for him. My brother was in the scrap business. And, you know, you can trust anyone and everyone, but you, in the back of your mind, you know, you can always hopefully trust your family. Okay. Yeah. And in my scenario, my father worked for me. My brother worked for me. I have a cousin. I had a best friend. By the way, all of these people over 20 years, except for my brother. He just passed away in September. But, you know, I had to play 2 roles my whole career. So here I am, the boss and the son. Mm-hmm. I'm the boss and the wife, the husband, the boss and the ex-wife, or I'm boss of my son, I'm boss of my daughter, I'm boss father, boss daughter, boss, and I'm playing 2 people.
Yeah.
And when shit hit the fan at work, it bled into the personal life of us. Okay. Yes. And so I always wanted my son and my daughter to take over my company. I'm sure that Cindy, my ex, felt the exact same. I would have never expanded in 2015. You know, I moved there to my expansion in 2015 with 0 debt.
Okay.
0 debt. And took on a $7.5 million debt in 2015. If you'll recall, those were some really nice years for us, right?
Yeah.
I lost $1 million my first year, 900 the second year. I've never lost money in my career. I'm down 1.9. And so I had my other location. So my son graduates out of college, and I made this huge mistake. Okay. My son should have gone to work for someone else.
Yeah.
For a year or 2, right? Mm-hmm. I knew that his education, he's extremely bright, like way brighter than what our industry would need. Very analytical, very hard worker. And it was in his blood, okay? But somehow he lost touch there. And God, you know, he's doing great. He's working at another scrapyard. But no different than you and your dad or the people that you've had podcasts, you know, I did the best I could as a father. Yeah. And I know that I did way better than I should have as being the supporter of my family and making sure that my family had every single thing. But those 2 role plays is what broke our family up. I mean, not my.
I can attest to it. I mean, I can attest to what you're saying, and as much as you don't want the two to bleed together, my dad and I working together, you know, two alpha type individuals who, you know, want to do things a certain way, and my dad having built, you know, a business and having kind of had some successes that he's had, you know, before I got there. And he wasn't rich and he hadn't built some crazy business, but he had success. And for me to come in and want to, you know, do it a different way and bring in young talent and people. And I had heard somebody say, you ever remember that show at Orange County Choppers or whatever? The father-son, they built motorcycles and they would get after each other. And there was tense times in our household, and when I had family get-togethers, my dad and I mean, we're here running a business, and we wouldn't talk for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and it's together, like, right?
Or at home probably either, right?
Yeah, and my dad and I today enjoy in my opinion, one of the best father-son relationships that you can really have.
God bless you. God bless him.
Yeah. My dad was my best man in my wedding.
Well, you know, I'm going to tell you something, Brett, you know, and you're not going to understand this either until you're in your 60s. And you decide, you know, your son or your daughter want to get in the business and they come in with these ideas. But something I don't ever want you to forget, or them, is at the end of the day, it's your business and you own it. Yeah. It's your money, it's your risk, okay? It's your liabilities. It's all on you. And so whatever ideas that you may have, if your father or I did the same to my son, struck him down, we have that right to do that. Okay? Yeah. It's not your business, son. It's not your business, daughter. It belongs to me. And when it's time for it to be yours, it'll be yours. But it's not on your time zone. It's on my time zone.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it because my son is an incredible operator. Okay. But today we have, my brother was working until he passed away. My cousin's been with me twice, I think now 25 or 30 years, off and on 2 times. My ex-wife is still there. My daughter came in about 8 or 9 years ago, and her fiance at the time was in the Marines. He was selling houses. He came in the business. He started on our wire chopper when we got it installed, and he's still with us till this day. And my son and I'm sad to say, haven't spoken in, it'll be 5 years next month. My mother and father are turning over in their grave because honestly, my son had it made, you know, and I will always love him and I will always respect him and I will always be his biggest fan. And it hurts and breaks my heart every motherfucking day. Okay. Yeah. But, you know, I decided, you know, in 2008, I think my company was up for sale. And it was 2 weeks before closing and the credit crunch hits and they backed out. Yeah. And then I get talked in to expanding by my son and I expand. And so, you know, we have this out and I didn't need to expand. I was happy as I could freaking be where I was. I was printing money. I had no debt and I wanted this to truly happen for us. Yeah. But it became a battle every day. And then it got into our personal, and, you know, Cindy, my ex, who's my partner, is incredible as a business partner. Okay. I could never find anyone better that could do what she's done for the past 44 years. But, you know, she didn't, in my heart, in my mind, she didn't do her part supporting me. Yeah. She could not separate the mother and
to speak to that a little bit, Dennis, and you have a very like the story you just told is a lot how my family, when my mom is the accountant, right? She's the CFO my whole life. She that's all she's ever done. CFO for all the for the business. And when I came in 04 and 05, 6, I was ready to expand. I was ready to build the business. And
did you have the money? Did you have the money?
I bought a house, I refinanced my house, and I bought my first scrapyard in Gooding, Idaho. And it with the help, and I basically would put up the down payment.
Right.
And that was kind of how we got that yard going. That being said, there was a lot of contentious in time. And so there was a time, and this is where I think it relates the most, is my mom is bar none the glue that made that deal work, because my dad and I would I mean, it was rough. It was a rough probably.
But did she stand
years.
behind him or stand behind you?
She took my dad's side.
Well, and that's probably,
and
you know,
and not all the time, but more often than not, she's, and my dad would be like, he would, I remember him saying this, he had a big brass eagle that came in on the scrapyard. It was like this big, and it had the wing broke off, and somebody had welded, like brass weld the eagle wing back on, and he sat it on the table and he said, "I'm the motherfucking eagle here." And he goes, "You do what you want, say what you want, leave if you want, but I'm the eagle. And until I leave, I'm the eagle." And it was like that, right? It was a very contentious. And to his credit, eventually I proved my worth, and I said, I love it. I'm going to keep grinding. And I stuck it out, and I kept going. And eventually he let me have a little bit more, to the point that I was able to kind of take over and get more people and build more and do more. So to his credit, he gave me the opportunity. To my mom's credit, she was the glue in the middle that found a way to keep me motivated enough to keep fighting, but she also kept me in check. And she said, "Brett, your dad, this is his fucking business, man. Like, say what you want, do what you want."
Yeah. My story could have possibly turned out different.
Yeah.
You know?
But when you told me that, this is the first time you and I have discussed this. I mean, we didn't discuss this ahead of time or anything, but you like, I almost got like emotional in a weird way, because I remember that, like, it wasn't that long ago for me that I just went through that. And so I've had people ask me this, and I want to touch on this before we go, but I've had people ask me, Brett, because I have two sons. I have a 13-year-old boy and a 9-year-old boy. I love them to death. They're my world. I got an awesome wife. My wife doesn't work in the business. She's a third grade school teacher. She's the queen of the house, right? And people have asked me, and my wife saw my dad and I go through a lot of this stuff, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, Thanksgiving's gonna be horrible." I'm like, "It's gonna be bad." And years. And so people ask me, are your boys gonna be in the scrap business? And I said, I don't know. I honestly, I said, I prefer, as much as I would love to carry it on another generation, I don't know that I want that battle. I was able to make it through. I lived to tell about it. My parents and I have an unbelievable relationship, which I'm absolutely grateful for. But I don't know that I'm ready for the battle that I fought with my parents, my dad more than anything. I don't want that. I don't know that I want that contentious.
There is no preparation for it. You know, I have a tattoo that says, "I'll never forget where I came from," and I won't ever forget where I came from. You know, and I came from
man. You're the ultimate self-made guy.
Yeah, well, I started my company with $2,000 from my father-in-law and my dad. That's what I started it with. And so anyway, lo and behold, I think that ultimately that was my dream. Okay. And I, about 17 months ago, I decided to go and try to market the company again. And so I had talked to you about this early on. And,
you told me
we went through some, the markets are fucked up. I'm thinking, every day, oh God, is this thing going to happen? I have never, ever, I've been through some stuff in my life, but this process, it took 14 months attorney fees that exceed numbers that I never thought. Time, but I had brought a strategic CEO company in. They brought a guy in to look at everything, audit everything. And, you know, all this time, I just stopped giving a shit. Like 5 years ago, when my son and I just said, you know what, fuck it. I don't need to work. I'm tired of the bullshit, you know? And so, oh, I forgot to tell you this, and I know this is getting long, but in 2020, that was a motherfucker for me.
Yeah.
February, I'm very safety conscious at my business. We have 2 safety meetings every week, mandatory. And there's certain things you better be doing. Well, guess what? I never did one thing, and that was put a hard hat on. Seldom. And every day I'm like you, Brett, filming shit and posting it on our fan page and posting it on LinkedIn. And I'm back in my yard with my foreman, and I've got my shear, and I'm about 20 feet. And I'm telling my operator, I want you to break this while I'm filming. It was a piece of 6,000-pound piece of cast iron. And so he's maneuvering it, and I've got this great filming going on, and it's like fucking incredible. And finally, he cuts a piece, and the piece falls on the ground. And then he turns it, and he cuts the next piece, and you don't see another fucking thing. That popped off after it sheared off, and it hits me in my head. It's downstairs right now on a painted block as a piece of artwork. It weighs 72 pounds. And I'm going to tell you something. My mother and father, may they rest in peace, they literally had to be standing next to me, and they did this. Like that, just touched, because that's how close I was to dying. I ended up with a fractured skull, 5 staples in my head, and a fractured ribs. Okay. Ambulance. I'm into the ambulance to the hospital, and then I'm ambulance to the trauma center. Now, mind you, this is February 13th of 2020. Wow. Guess what you and the rest of the world are getting ready to encounter? I'm in a trauma center, Memorial Hermann Hospital, the best trauma center in probably the country, and the worst hospital to ever go to for anything else. And I'm this close. Our beds are fucking lined up within 6 inches of each other. There's people there. And so that's February. May, I have early COVID that kicked our ass. I'm down for a week, okay? So I'm already off work. Now come October, I end up with lip cancer. November, I have a fucking TIA, a mini stroke. And that's when I decided, you know what? Fuck this. Yeah. I put a run in, and I made an incredible business that till this day, when I drive by there and I look at this fucking red fence that goes on for fucking 800 yards on, and I'm thinking, how the hell did I get here? How did this happen to me? And once I put the company up, trying to get over the fact that my son and I are not together. This was going to be his and my daughter's. You know, it's kicking my ass. It's I'm not getting the support I needed from my partner to help me with this fucking situation. And I went on the market, and I had talked to you early on, and I ended up getting a couple of big companies that offered out. Another company offered out, and I decided to go with this young company. It was because I knew either a financial, I was going to end up, my ass was going to be plugged in there for a year or two, or to find me a strategic buyer. Yeah. The due diligence process was probably worse than an Internal Revenue Service audit. So lo and behold, I hired the guy that the CFO company brought in to get all of our shit together, and I make him my CFO, and he takes 35% or more of my workload off my ass. I can't find scale people. I'm short 3 scale operators. I need all this shit. Yeah. And I just said, you know what? We're done. I got to get out. This company, they have 2 other scrap yards in Houston. Merchant Scrap Metal is the name of it. I'm thinking that's what he told me to say. Merchant Metals or something. They're a young guy. He owns a scrap yard in Fort Bend, and he owns one right here in Southwest Houston. And I had to, by the way, keep this a secret for 14 months from every single person. I think I told my brother, my cousin, my daughter and son-in-law had to know, and my brother.
Yeah.
I couldn't say a word to any employees for 14 months. There's people coming in, they're appraising, they're doing a phase 1, they're doing a phase 2, and I'm thinking, so finally, somehow somebody said something to me. And we're ready, we're almost getting there, probably 2 months, maybe, I think, away from closing. And he kind of hinted to me that we were sold. And I said, fuck, that's not good. And that's when so about 2 weeks, I think, prior to it being completed, I brought my employees in. And I'm tearing up, right? I'm tearing up telling you the story. And I told them I've had enough, and I decided to make a change, and I've sold the company. And I said, they're not coming in here to make changes. They're coming here because they need us. They have these other companies. They're not anywhere near the size of us. They have a baby shredder there. They have all the cranes at both of their facilities. They have their own end dumps. And I said, I can't do it anymore. And it beat them down. Because
I think the biggest thing, man, is it lives on. Like,
well, they've been there from 5 to 33 years. The last thing they expected was me to say that.
Yeah, it's gonna live on. And I think you had it, like you said it best, man. I had a hell of a run. And it's not about I posted something on LinkedIn the other day, and I think this is important for you, is it's not your obligation to give your son a business. It's your obligation, or your daughter, a business. It's your obligation to give them the courage to do it on their own. That's your obligation as a parent, right? It's not my obligation to make my kids rich. And I know I don't look at it that way. I don't look at some others, the nepotism and the generational money and all that. And I don't care how much you sold your business for. It doesn't matter to me. It's not your obligation to give
200 million. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's not your obligation to give them a business. My parents didn't give me anything. They didn't give me a business. They just gave me a chance. You gave your kid a chance, and you gave him an idea of a career that could be built. And that's all you.
I have an argument with a friend of mine,
and I think I want you to know that, and I think you do. My goal. I'm going for generational courage, not generational money.
Right.
That's what I'm shooting for. I want my kids, in the face of the government telling you what you can do and what you can't do, and everybody trying to scare you about everything and scare you from being independent and scare you from doing this. I want to pass down generational courage that says, if you want something bad enough, if you're willing to work the hours it takes to build it, and you're willing to put the patience in that it takes to actually build something worthwhile, it's still fucking possible.
Oh yeah. I wanted to say that he wanted me to let you know it's Merchants Metal Recycling. They own Fort Bend, they own H-Town Recycling, and they're getting ready to open up several C&D scraps in Houston. So my legacy will go on, right?
Yep.
And I don't know what my place is. I'm really not working now.
Last piece of advice. This is what I want out of you, man. If you give one piece of advice to generational family business, one piece of advice, you having lived it, done it, and it can be anything. I don't care if it's anything to the industry you think that they'll appreciate, that they'll take away from this. Like, what's the one thing you want people to know about C&D and about you?
Well, I have a friend of mine that sold a company. His father had, they had a huge company, and he bought his mother out. And I always say to him, your father gave you a foundation. He didn't give me shit. He says we were in debt. I said, well, he didn't give you a foundation. You're in the same business that he's in. And you really literally have a fucking cement foundation here, and you're in the business. So you need to give your father a little bit of credit there, right? Look, I did all I could do. I wanted something. It didn't happen. At the end of the day, Brett, I have zero regrets. I could not be any happier. I live in Houston. I live in Florida. I have a place there. I just need to keep my mind busy.
Yeah.
And I always need to keep this on my mind, and I'll say it over. Never forget where I came from, because what I have today could be gone tomorrow.
Yep.
And so if you want to get somewhere, go out there and work your ass off. In this business, there's nothing like our industry. There's not another business. I look at this deal I did like 3 days before I sold out. I made $53,000 on Inco 718 shavings in about 12 minutes.
Yeah.
What business in the world is there that gives you that opportunity? I sent you that stage, that aluminum thing.
Yeah.
I told you that was when Janet Jackson exposed her boobs. That came from MTV. And the next thing I know, it was on People magazine. That's the stage that Janet came in.
Yeah.
And came off on the stage, and her boob fell out. I have stories. I bought a casket and I put it on my property. So, because there was a lot, they couldn't see me. And I put a big bird on top of it. I put a gorilla on top of it. I did some crazy shit. But you know something? It worked for me. And I spent, I don't know, $12 million, I guess, in marketing over that 44-year career. And this company's going to come in, and I hope they keep, they're young and they're going to get it going. And
I love
God
it.
bless them.
I love it. And I wish them the best. I wish you the best. And man, I love it. I can't thank you enough. And at the end of the day, leave with this. Never forget where you came from.
That's it, brother. And hey, I appreciate you getting me on here. The only thing I really ever knew about Idaho was the potatoes.
And now I'm gonna get your ass out to Idaho. I'm gonna have you come.
Right. So the bottom line is, I have nothing to do. Right now.
Now all you got is time, right?
I got a pedicure the other day, but you know what? I am going to make it to Idaho, and I don't bullshit and I don't play games. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I don't know what.
Let's do it, man. I'm in.
But I'm gonna come, as long as it's not cold. I'm not into cold.
Well, come in the summer. Come in the summer.
Right.
All
anyway,
right,
man, thanks again, Brett.
Absolutely. You have a great day, and hope everybody enjoys this. And
don't forget, we paying $2 bills.
Yes, sir.
Scrap metal needs. Take care.
Take care.